Hey everybody, it's Mike. I want to share with you an observation that I've experienced since I've started this channel and since I've started interacting with people who've come to the channel and left comments. So, for those of you who are new, this is a channel devoted to non-borderlines who have been in romantic relationships or are currently in a romantic relationship with somebody who has full on borderline personality disorder. If you are a borderline, some borderlines come to the channel, and there's all different kinds of opinions, but some people seem to be getting something out of it. The best way that you can use this channel, in my opinion, is to listen to what it's like for a non-borderline and what the result of what your mental illness does to you, how it also affects other people, and with the hope that you'll take that knowledge to get healing and empowerment for yourself, which will also benefit anybody else that you have in your life. And by the way, I believe in therapy and I believe in recovery, so I don't think that there's really anything to be gained by just choosing not to deal with it. I've seen some people who seem to have that response as well. It's they're just going to run away from everything. And while I understand that, you're here in this body for this lifetime. This is the only chance you get to be in this body and this mind. You owe it to yourself to get the most out of life. And that means maybe doing some difficult things like going and getting some help. This is also true for the non-borderlines. All the non-borderlines are like, yeah, go get some help. Well, you need help too. So, but I'm seeing something that is shared by both the borderlines and the non-borderlines in many of the responses and comments that are left for me. So I'll share one of the most recent ones, which actually had me confused as to who was on the other end of that comment. And that comment was a question directed at me, which, by the way, if you don't realize it, if you leave these kinds of comments, you may not realize it, but they're actually very aggressive. You may not even realize they're coming across that way, but I can feel that. And the question was, why do you keep calling yourself a codependent? You're just somebody that got blindsided. Now, there's all kinds of defense mechanisms involved in that. But the main thing is that I can tell you what was really going on in that question. But what's important to know that both codependents and borderlines, especially those who are untreated, they will use this tactic, which is to turn around and put the focus back on whoever's presenting the information. In this case, me. And I'm very clear that I keep referring to myself as a codependent. I also say that I am in a state of recovery, in that I've gotten my life back together. The only reason that I even think about borderline personality disorder and being a codependent to a borderline is because I've made the decision to continue to actively participate in this channel since I've seen it take off, and I've seen that it's been really helpful. This channel is blowing up so fast, and I've got another channel. As you can see, all these other links are my other channel, the Thunder Wizard channel. I am working my tail off on that, and that one, it barely moves at all, and it hasn't been moved for a while. This channel's blowing up. I'm not doing anything, so I'm putting some effort into it because I see it's being really helpful. But I'm having to actually go back into the annals of my brain and remember a lot of the experiences that I had and bring them forward. I don't know why I said that. In any case, I found that to be a very aggressive comment, and I found there to be a lot of projection in that comment. In other words, I'm fully responsible for why I choose to identify myself in any way whatsoever. That's my choice. I choose to do that. what it means is that that individual, when every time they heard me say that I'm a codependent, or when I say anybody who's in a relationship or has been in a relationship with a borderline for anything more than a few days, by definition, you are codependent. Obviously, you've seen that there are people who resist that. But instead of coming out and saying, when you talk about yourself being a codependent, it makes me feel uncomfortable, or it makes me feel threatened, or it makes me want to defend myself, or whatever. Instead of that, they turn around and aggressively come at me and say, why do you keep calling yourself a codependent? You're just an innocent victim. And what would, in my experience, you get a lot better result when you own your own feelings. And an honest question would be, or an honest comment would be, when you talk about yourself being a codependent, it makes me really uncomfortable. Even to say, when I hear you talk about yourself being a codependent, it makes me want to talk you out of that. And then you can get to what the unconscious projection obviously is that you're projecting onto me. You don't want to be a codependent, so you want to talk me out of me saying I'm a codependent. And you have whatever other judgments are about being a codependent, which most people do, which is, that you're weak and, you don't have control and these kinds of things. So I can only assume that those were some things that were also going on in this person's mind. But I've found that that's actually not too far from what the untreated borderline does, who comes onto my channel and just, attacks me and calls me all kinds of horrible names. Why don't you walk out in front of a bus and, put yourself out of our misery? That's obviously a borderline who doesn't like what I'm saying. Oh my God, stop feeling sorry for yourself, things like that. That's obviously a borderline who's threatened by, somebody saying how hurtful, how horrifically hurtful it is, that their behavior is. And I remember that when I, as the relationship with my borderline ex was coming to its final cataclysmic destructive end, I was very straightforward about my feelings about, what the way that she was discarding me and breaking every single promise that she had made, just the day before, and, just unthinkable, in the most hurtful situation, time frame. I mean, it was just, you couldn't have planned it out more painfully than what she did. And I was sharing my feelings about, I feel like I've been murdered and left at the side of the road. And she's like, oh my God, why are you so full on? Making such a big deal out of it. It's just, so it's understandable when the borderline doesn't like hearing how badly you've hurt them, or they've hurt you. They don't like hearing that they then respond defensively. And, I'm not a borderline, so I don't know how much of it they know, but there's got to be some discomfort in them needing to downplay and deny everything. Or there could be outright guilt of them knowing what they're doing, to what degree they're knowing, and them not being able to stop themselves and needing to, make it your fault so that they can feel more comfortable in their own skin. Those are all human things we do. Here's the thing about borderline personality disorder. When you're able to see it for what it is, that it's an infant that is screaming out for the love and the nurturing and the intimacy that it absolutely needs for its survival. And when that need is not being met, you can understand the severity of their response. They don't realize it, that every time that you give them the intimacy that they crave, it stimulates them to go all the way back to 2 months old or 3 months old, or however old they were, when they were screaming, probably literally crying, rageful, because we don't realize it, but infants feel rage as well. And they can't express it in any other way other than screaming really loud. So take that feeling, put it in the body of an adult. You happen to be, like in my case, we happen to be out for dinner, and I happen to, get a look on my face, apparently, that I'm unaware of. Maybe I had gas, or maybe she said something that triggered me on an emotional level. Just that, the slight look in my eye, maybe my pupils dilated, just that in and of itself was enough to push her to the point where she screams, "Stop looking at me like that," and then getting up and walking away. Well, that totally irrational, undeserved, confusing, extreme response came out of her in that moment. That look in my eye took her all the way back to being an infant, where the only thing that they can do is scream, cry to get mommy and daddy to come and give them what they really need. So it's understandable when the borderline attacks me. That's why I just block them and I don't respond. But because I am codependent, I know that I have what I can do. So when a codependent acts aggressively like that, I'm going to point it out, because we're on the same team. But it's the same thing. It's a milder version. So that response to me of, why do you keep calling yourself a codependent? I mean, there's a judgment. You may say that with a smile on your face, like, "Hey, buck up, pal, you're strong." There's a judgment in there of, I'm being weak. Why are you being so weak? Why are you saying this about yourself? I'm saying it about myself because that's how I recover, is to get honest. And the honest truth is that I would never have gotten involved with borderline had I not had my own deep, untreated, intimacy, nurturing childhood wound within me. If I hadn't had that, I wouldn't be chasing after a borderline who reminds me of myself, because they exhibit it so much, it's just so undeniable. The infant that's not getting the love. Obviously, I had that. Non-borderlines do not get involved. You don't get blindsided. That doesn't happen. If they do get blindsided, it happens once. If you're not codependent, you get blindsided once and you go, "Wow, that person has real problems. Stay away from them." Whereas the codependent goes, "Wow, that person has real problems. I need to go fix them," because they want to be fixed. But point I'm trying to make in this video is that it's the same thing. The borderline coming on and saying that I should go step in front of a bus and get it over with and stop feeling sorry for myself is the exact same impulse that's happening from the codependent, who says, "Why do you keep calling yourself a codependent? You were just a victim." It's coming from that same point. That when I say that I'm a codependent, that I come from this place of deep, unresolved childhood wounding, where my mother didn't give me enough love and attention, and where I was shamed and abused as a kid, that has created such a horrific need in me that I fell in love with somebody who was completely, totally, not only not there, but incapable of loving me back in any way. That's called being codependent. And that's where I get my healing from. So when I hear that kind of, smile on the face, passive aggressive, not sharing your own feelings about yourself and projecting them onto me, that's what I see. I see somebody who has a defense mechanism and isn't being honest. So the point is that if you want to heal, regardless of if you are a borderline or if you are a codependent, is to be honest about yourself and your own feelings. I'm not a borderline, so I don't know. I'm not saying this is what they should do. I'm now that I'm on this channel, I'm now researching and listening to other borderlines talk, and it still comes down to the same thing I learned. in my almost 40 years in 12-step recovery is that that you learn how to take actions that are contrary to your seemingly all-powerful impulses. So I can only assume that what happens is something happens when the borderline is starting to feel real intimacy. Like in my case, I was taking her out to dinner. We were going out to dinner, and instead of being the narcissist who buys her, her dinner for her and makes all the decisions for her, I was treating her like an equal, and she wanted me to order for her, and I was like, no, sweetie, you can order for yourself. I don't need to do that for you. I'm happy for you to do your own thing. That created an intimacy and a respect and a love, I'm assuming, that she isn't comfortable with, which threw her all the way back to that moment where she didn't get what she needed. And so the feeling of being loved drew her back to the love that was never given, and the pain, the unresolved pain of being rejected. It's really important to understand that. This is the ironic thing. The love that you give them is the very thing that drives them back to the original wound, where they then go back to that scream crying that never got addressed. So the rageful borderline is somebody who doesn't have the ability to stop the rage, and the rageful borderline, in some is just responding, goes straight to the rage. You're abandoning me, you hate me, and therefore I'm going to kill you kind of rage. It feels like it's killing them. The quiet borderline, like I had, they've gotten one step, which is they stop themselves from raging, so they turn around and they stuff it all inwards, but they still act out unconsciously by walking away, or in the case of the girl I was with, she would go, instead of attacking me, she'd go into the bedroom and meditate for 3 hours, which meant that she was trying to deal with, trying to put a lid on the rage, and she was trying, so she was making an effort to not take it out, but because she wasn't able to fix that, whatever the dysfunction is inside of her, she wasn't able to go all the way out and then take full, complete responsibility for her feelings and take contrary action. But that's what it comes down to. But the first thing is to be able to get honest on what you're feeling. You have to be able to identify your feelings. So whether you're the borderline or whether you're the codependent, when you hear me say something that pushes a button in you, instead of attacking me like the rageful borderlines do, or some borderlines, there was a borderline who sent me links to songs that you sound like this, to which I responded, are you a borderline? Because the song was basically saying, why are you blaming me? I'm just doing my thing, right? I don't know this person. What are you sending me links to songs for? I'm just a guy on YouTube. And then, there are others that will want to point out, what I'm not getting right about, what I'm saying about being, about what borderlines do and all that kind of stuff. To which I can tell. I go, so are you a borderline? Every single one that's responded has said yes. So this was one where I almost said, when this person said, why do you keep calling yourself a codependent when you're an innocent victim? My first, because it was like, that's weird. You're not saying anything about yourself. I feel like I'm being somehow judged for being honest about my codependence. Because if this is projection. If you're okay with me saying that I'm this, you're going to go, he says he's that. And I'm not. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay that he is that and I'm not. But if obviously I'm pushing a button and you hear in yourself in me, and you don't want to acknowledge that you're a codependent, then instead of saying, wow, that makes me really uncomfortable because I don't want to admit that I'm a codependent, instead you turn it on me and you say, why do you keep calling yourself that? Or in some of the more aggressive codependents, there's some codependents can be really aggressive too, and they can be really destructive. Don't get me wrong, codependents are carrying the same rage that the borderline is. They just have, a more sophisticated way of dealing with it, or a less explosive way. But they explode too. But they get really into me like, you need to stop saying that. You're saying untruth and you're confusing the issue. And, there's a difference between being somebody who just has a lot of empathy and cares too much and being a codependent. A codependent is, and then, all the weak things they think a codependent is. But I'm not that. I've got love and I've got empathy. So it's the same thing. It's there's something I'm saying that's pushing a button in you. And so the key to recovery for both is to be able to get honest and go, I feel this way, and then to learn how to take constructive action. And ideally what that means, I'm assuming for a borderline, it's the same for, all kinds of other different things, is to be able to identify their feeling. And even if they can't identify their feeling, they're wanting to rage. And instead of raging, they take conscious contrary action, which does not mean going off into the bedroom and closing the door for 3 hours and meditating. That would be an act. You'd be acting out on your rage. Yes, you're not yelling and screaming and throwing things, but it's still the same. Or what my BPDX would do is that she wouldn't split on me in the moment. Like I would say or do something, or she would have a feeling, and I could see, because I can now in hindsight, I could see the look in her eye where she would split. But instead of acting on it, she would sit with it and pretend everything was okay, and then make an excuse to leave or something like that. Then she would spend all night, I'm assuming, wrestling with that feeling, and then she would lose the battle. And then the next day, she would very calmly tell me why she had to break up with me and why, sometimes it was my fault. And sometimes it was just, I can't put my finger on it. I just feel like something really bad is going to happen and I can't be with you. It's the same thing. Instead of raging at me, she turned it inward and still acted. But that is not the same as analyzing your feelings, saying, I'm feeling like this, and I know, and being honest. This is when you know I have borderline personality disorder and splitting is what I do. And so in this moment, even though I either want to yell at them or go on run and hide, I'm going to stay and talk about how afraid I am. And I'm going to listen to your response as you respond back to me, and I'm going to get a reality check, and then I'm going to learn to be okay with this intense feeling that I need to run away or destroy you or whatever else. And the same is true with the codependent. The obvious one is leaving. When the borderline has harmed you and has abused you, and it is abuse, because again, they're operating from this infant scream crying, and I feel for them, but that's not an excuse for causing other people harm. When they do that, you have to take the contrary action, which is everything in you wants to stay, wants to chase after them, wants to wait for them, wants to go and fix them, wants to allow yourself to be gaslighted and take the blame for their craziness. And instead, the contrary action is to do everything different than what your impulse is, which is you don't realize it, but try and control them by getting them to love you and staying. The opposite is to let them have it. Say, you're right, this isn't good for either of us. I wish you all the best. I must go no contact. Which, looking back on it, I'm grateful that I had that ability when the last time my BPDX split on me. And I remember talking to her and asking her, when I went back to get closure, and I said, so How long do you expect this no contact will go? And she said, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months. And I don't remember, but I think I may have said, so, well, what's going to happen what's going to be different in 2 or 3 months? At which point I think that's when she got up and left. At the end of that, she said, I can't do this. And she got up and walked away. It might not have been that, but I think it was in that frame of time where, I think I asked a question that I think even she couldn't come up with an answer for. Anyway, I'm babbling on and on about different stuff. Point being is that the recovery starts with being honest, with your being able to identify your own feelings and being able to identify what feelings are being stimulated within you. And then learning how to take contrary action, to what you think might be your best impulse. And that's true, I think, with both the borderline and the codependent. So, bottom line is codependents and borderlines both, I'm finding, are doing the same thing, which is they deflect. They make it about me. Either I need to walk in front of a bus because I'm so dramatic and why can't I get it over with? Or the recent guy I told you about, who I think is a codependent, who said, thank you so much. Now why don't you shut the fuck up? And this more recent one, which is, why do you keep calling yourself a codependent? You're just a victim. And if you can replace that with what they really want to say with, which is, why do you keep saying I'm a codependent? I was just a helpless victim. That's really what that person wanted to say. But aggressively, passive aggressively, deflecting it, making it me and it's my fault. So those are just some observations as I'm going through this, and I know I'll continue to learn some more. This has been a really great experience, and I'm really looking for more. So please feel free to leave questions. I love responding to questions. If you respond positively and consciously, you will get positive conscious responses from me. If you act out in ways that I perceive to be unconscious or passive aggressive or projection, I'm going to lovingly point it out to you. And it's okay with me if you don't like it, but it will benefit others. I love the idea of the interaction and the discussion that can come from this channel. And I will learn as time goes on what is the best thing for the channel and what is the best thing for people. So this is an experiment we all get to enjoy. So having said that, I hope everybody listening to me finds their identity, because both borderline personality disorder and codependence comes from a lack of identity. You don't know who you are. You can't be powerful within yourself. And I hope that you find that. Find the power within yourself. Find the love, find the self-confidence, and realize that you are, in fact, completely eternal and divine, and that you are God in the flesh. And when you can find that and find that road to getting back to your infinite soul, that's where the healing is. But it starts with where you are and being honest about how you feel, and not deflecting it onto me or anybody else around you. All right, that's it. Talk to you guys later.